All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Eversio Experience podcast. Wherever you are, I hope you are already having an amazing day. And for our athlete friends who are really missing that joy and inspiration and that sense of national pride that we all experienced while watching the Summer Olympics in Paris this month, we have a very special treat for you. Normally, Dr. Desiree and I are here on the podcast on our own, just sharing our love of mushroom wellness and all the latest and greatest research from the kingdom fungi. But today, we have a guest to share with you. That is right, a fungi friend and our very first ever guest. And she is awesome. We cannot wait to dive deep into all things health and wellness and the journey of a professional athlete with the fabulous Cassie Hawrysh today. Cassie is best known as both a Team Canada alumna and a media professional. She transitioned from the sport of volleyball to become a World Cup competitor and Olympic alternate in the sport of women's skeleton. If you're trying to remember which Winter Olympic sport that is, it's the one where you're traveling at I think it's 140 kilometers an hour head first down an icy track. So much fun. In her career, Cassie claimed numerous podium finishes and the title of 2013-2014 Canadian champion. Since retiring from international competition, Cassie hasn't exactly slowed down, and today we're going to hear all about what she's been up to lately and how mushrooms have become part of her journey. And just so that you're in the loop, we are three ladies on location today with Dr. Des holding down the fort at Eversio HQ. Cassie is coming to us from Calgary in Canada, and I am soaking up every last minute of summer at the lake here in BC's interior. So buckle up for a great Canadian ride, our fungi friends. And Cassie, welcome to the podcast. We are so glad to have you.
Thank you so much. Love the intro, and I'm very excited to finally be here.
Okay. Let's go back to the beginning, Cassie. Why don't you tell our audience a bit more about who you are and fill us in on all of the juicy bits about your journey as a professional athlete?
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, we'll front end load this a little bit. So, yes, athletics in all forms was something that I picked up as a very young age. I mean, speaking of summer games, gymnastics was the first thing that I just rolled into and absolutely loved it and was bendy and little and all the things. But I think they figured out pretty quick that my legs were going to get way too long and the separation between the uneven bars was never going to be long enough. So ultimately that wasn't my path, but volleyball was, as you mentioned, and when I found it in grade 7, that was it for me. I dropped off everything else and just wanted to play volleyball, and thankfully, growing up in Brandon, Manitoba, there was a lot of volleyball. Might not have had access to every single sport I could have seen, but volleyball was something that you could do in the summer and the winter, and I definitely did that. So it took me all the way through high school and ultimately would be the way that I got into university. So grades were great. I knew I wanted to be in a communications or journalism world. They didn't always line up in terms of scholarships for me. It would either be all the money for sport, no access to what I wanted for school, or all the money and they'd have the programs that I wanted, but the team maybe wasn't either as good as, either one way or another. It wasn't going to work out. And the dollar was very close to what it is now. So quite hard for us to just pay up the difference. So I looked for a school in Canada that had the program to some degree that I wanted and ultimately looked at the team that I could make. So we'll say back in the day, but it was early 2000s. The internet was around, but we did all of our recruiting was from a VHS tape that got sent out with a printed version of all my stats and everything. And I sent out, I think my parents spent what at that time would have been a lot of money to get those printed and sent and mailed from a company. And not a single Canadian school wanted me, whether they wanted me or looked at me, whatever it was. And it was very disheartening. I am 5'7", so for all the volleyball players out there, yes, that's not very tall, and no, I wasn't a setter, and the libero position had only just come into the scene kind of the last couple years of my career as a high school student. So I really expected to play left side as a power, and it was going to be tough, but that all said, all the U.S. teams that wanted me, it wasn't going to work out. So I chose the University of Windsor in Windsor, Ontario. People that live, all Canadians are going to be, why would you pick there? I have no regrets. Windsor might not be the place everyone wants to settle down, but it was a really great place for me to try. And ultimately I did walk on to the team. So I had called and the head coach at the time said, yeah, we saw your video. Crickets. So I was okay, well, I'm coming there, so can I try out? And they said ultimately yes. And so that worked out, and that's how I played volleyball for that first year and a half. And I say that because it was a little bit of a tragedy that wasn't a long-term tragedy, but my dad did have a heart attack that first winter, which shifted a lot of my perspective, and my identity and all those things came into play. And that was
And
how
he was back home and you
he,
were away.
yeah. And so I was 18
Oh,
years old, and if at the time, important to know, just like everyone else would have been 19, so OUA in grade 13 was still a thing. So I was also kind of a year behind everybody, but still participating in that same world. I'm an only child, so I was excited to leave home, but that was the farthest I'd lived away from my parents ever. So there was a lot of push and pull. Ultimately, I made the decision after the first semester of my second year. So my dad did recover. Everything was all good, but things were shifting at home. Our business had to get sold, my parents' business, etc. So there was a lot of things behind the scenes. And I really, now looking back, I was probably taking some of that stuff on, whether it was mine or not. I didn't really understand, the pressures, but I just knew something needed to shift. So I changed schools. And I actually didn't use my second year of eligibility. So university students get 5 years, for anyone that's wondering. And so I used a year and then didn't use the first semester. I just redshirted and then changed schools to the University of Regina, where it was a little bit closer. So in Saskatchewan. So instead of 2 days drive, it was a 10-hour drive, 8 hours. So a little bit closer, but still far enough away where I felt I had some separation and some adulthood. And they had a journalism school, which was really the big draw for me. So I was going to have to, for what it's worth, just for athletes to know, if you're listening and you're wondering what happens when you change schools, well, it's not just a quick, great, welcome to your new school, you can start another sport. Regardless, you have to sit out a year. That's how, that way they don't pull athletes from school to school. So, and even in Canada, a lot of the courses don't translate. So I spent a lot of that first semester I got there fighting with syllabuses and trying to compare courses to try and get my credits to transfer over so that I didn't lose an entire year and a half of school. And I was diligent. I think I only lost 2 classes because I just went to bat every single day. I was in the office at the registrar. No. So my expectation going into that was I would do a year of school, apply for the journalism school. They really only took 26 people every year. So it was very, very competitive. And then I'll make the volleyball team and I'll be, et cetera, et cetera. Well, unfortunately, that's not how it went out. I went for the tryouts the following summer to play for the next year, and they cut me. 3 days of tryouts, everything feeling so good up to that point. Again, 19 years old, just turned 20. I was devastated. My parents actually came over to Regina because they were like, oh, we'll see you make the team. Not. So I was, what? I've moved twice.
what's the message here?
Yeah, and you're too young to even think that. My dad almost died. My parents lost their business. I've moved 2 schools. Full transparency, I had a boyfriend at the time who was going to Regina. I went there and we were together. We broke up right before that. There was just so young. I was, what?
The world is crumbling.
What's the point, right? So I still didn't know if I got into the School of Journalism, and I was waiting for that. So I can't just bail on this school. I have hope that that's going to happen. So what am I going to do? Say I get into that school, what's the plan? And so I thought about it, not very long, but I have to do another sport. What can I do that is this? If I've played volleyball since grade 7 and I'm now 20 years old, I run and I jump. So I'll call the track and field team. And I did. And now Paralympic coach, but at the time she was our head coach there, Carla Nichols, was, absolutely. Track teams love athletes. So they were, let's go. Come on the team. We'll just teach you what you need to know. We just want bodies. Turns out I was, in her eyes anyways, ready to do more than just one thing, and ultimately to save ourselves some time. I ended up becoming a heptathlete, which is the 7 event for the women, as many of you seen. So I thought I was coming to just do some long jump or high jump or something, maybe a couple sprints or 200. No, I had to learn every damn sport, every event, that, including some of the ones I didn't do because let's just figure it out. So I had a very humbling experience for the next 4 years of my career, but ultimately were what created my physical ability and probably a lot of mental resilience too, to ultimately discover skeleton when I was 25 years old.
Okay, wait, did you get into journalism school?
Oh, yeah, I did.
That is amazing. I also played university soccer. I played a college sport, and that is unheard of to switch sports in university, right? Like you said, most people are in a particular sport training for many, many, many years. So I think it speaks to your athleticism, but also you said your mental resilience to be able to say, you know what, I'm learning something totally new. There are people here who have been training for this for many, many years. You're the rookie on the team.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm just here to learn and
Yeah.
I'm going to have fun and, build some skills and learn and all of these things. That's amazing.
It was so humbling. If you think you're a good athlete and you do other sports that aren't track and field, and I'm just going to race some track athlete who's been doing it since they were 6, God bless you, because you're in for quite the entertaining experience. They're going to be better than you. I was trash. I was athletic, but I was nowhere competitiveness for at least a year and a half. And I had to work very hard to even not only feel I belonged, because I was eating a lot of humble pie in the back all the time thinking, oh, this sport is very natural, right? You're running around. No, it's a very technical sport, regardless of whether you're doing sprints, you're doing long distance, you're doing throws, you're doing jumps. It was huge for me, and the team and the athletes around me that were willing to accept a 20-year-old who had, quite frankly, no business being there in some cases. But my attitude was, if I'm going to be here, then I'm going to be here to compete with you, not just to go for the ride. And thankfully, Regina also had, if you kept an 80 average, they'd pay for almost all your school. So that was how I managed both those things without a scholarship, because I was, to figure this out, that was the point. So it really, really did create a new atmosphere for me. And I was the only full-time athlete in the journalism program, because it was a full-time program too. No one else was like, who's doing two jobs at that point?
Yeah, brains and brawn. You were bringing it so young. It's so incredible. Okay, so tell us a bit then about that. Where does skeleton come in?
So I graduated and was still running outdoors and had met many, many, many amazing people, coaches all along the way, both in the States and Canada, and ultimately knew I was never going to be an Olympian in the sport of track and field. To the point, I didn't start young enough, and nor did I really try. I did competitions and tried out for Team Canada, things like that, but no. I look at some of the times now and how much faster they already are in just a short decade or so. No. So I knew that.
Yeah, because they were all taking cordyceps back then, we know.
There you go. I didn't know.
That's what you were missing.
So ultimately my life took me to move to Calgary. So I was living in Saskatchewan for the bulk of, even after I graduated, and was working full time for the government there and kind of just doing the adult thing, thinking this is what I need to do. But I was running outdoors. So I was just at that point had stepped away from the 7 events, was I didn't need to be a part of that anymore, and became a 400-meter hurdler, which, if anyone knows about that sport, is a very difficult sport, but hey, it was just one, so I could do this, and there's still hurdles in the way, so I did enjoy it. That's one that I watch every year still, and I'm baffled at how fast those girls, the world record was broken this year. There was something about it that I just really liked. So I was kind of dabbling a bit still in that, and moved to Calgary without much of a plan. Moved here to move here, quite frankly, and the track and field community were also kind of intermingling with some of the skeleton and bobsleigh athletes, because in the summer, skeleton and bobsleigh don't slide. They train track and field athletes. Ultimately, that's how it happened. So I was looking for a group to train with. Yeah. They were happy to have somebody a bit faster, do some sprints with them. And ultimately, I would end up with hey, do you want to try pushing a sled in the ice house? Hey, what do you think about this sport? Come. And then you're starting to think, oh, this is kind of cool. And then the Olympics were in Vancouver in 2010. So this was 2009 that I moved there. So that winter, we had won, the bid was for Canada, and I went and watched. And that's anyone that had even one sport that they got to take in or were in Vancouver during any part of those games knows that experience was just too impactful for everyone. If you were an athlete at that time and you dipped your toe a bit further in, you were inspired to do so. And I was at the finish line when John Montgomery won, which I didn't realize was going to be such a big deal, right? I was just there to watch. I probably knew 10% more than everyone else there because I tried it. I thought it was kind of cool, but I wasn't driving a sled. I could by the end of my career, that's for sure. But John's family was actually standing behind me during it. So there was just a lot of emotion that all happened at the same time. And ultimately, spoiler alert, a few years later, he and I would be teammates.
That lit your fire. I could feel it. We've all been there watching those moments through a screen, and we feel it. I can't imagine the energy of standing there in that moment. There was no doubt you were, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do this. Look at how happy everybody is. Why wouldn't I want to do this? This is incredible.
So cool.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up wanting to be an Olympian. I loved the high performance, and volleyball was something I would have loved to play beach or something. I think that was always somewhere in my mind, but it wasn't there for me. I didn't land as something I dreamed about as a kid for whatever reason. So to have that Olympic dream land in my lap at 21, I was just, 25 years old when I found it. And you're like,
Let's go.
okay, yeah, why not? Why not me?
Let's go.
I love that. So Cass, let's get into a bit how we became connected. And I think even before we do that, tell us about your health story and how functional mushrooms became a part of that.
Yeah, so obviously health and wellness was a huge part of my life. I mean, and I for always would say that I was somebody that was very in tune with my body. And I kind of say that with an asterisk now. I was in tune with my body in the way that it needed to be a performer. It wasn't necessarily in tune with my body in all of the intricacies as a female. I had a regular, we'll start there. So this was about my period. So I had a regular, pretty regular period from a young age. Around 13 or 14, I got my period. Didn't think much of it. I think the only experience I ever really had was trying birth control for acne around 17 or 18 was the recommendation. I'd gotten, hey, try this, it'll help. And whatever pill they prescribed me at that point, tried it. I had, at the time, I was a young girl.
Oh.
I had a 30-day bleed on that first round of birth control. And I bring that up because obviously it's going to play into this, but the point is that was a terrible experience for me. My mom and I remember her saying something, I had something that happen once when I took a certain brand, but I was like, wait, this is a thing that can happen. We didn't even discuss this. So we switched brands, I regulated, I took it for a year. I went off of it, to be honest. I didn't how I felt. And I did experience what happens after you go off birth control at 19. I put on weight pretty quick. And granted, there was a lot going on as I described. I'd changed schools, but it was weird. What's happening? Evidently, as I know now, it was a big hormone shift for my body and no regulation, right? You were just sending yourself into the abyss. So aside from that small, what I would refer to as a blip of my experience with my menstruation, otherwise it was pretty straightforward. I mean, I'd have pretty solid 28, 30-day cycles. For the most part, they were 7 days long of bleeding. I didn't have any big symptoms. I was blessed to not have aggressive cramps or anything like that. And my heart goes out to all the women who have much harder versions of actually experiencing your bleed. But again, this was something we talked about. Athletes would all discuss it. We knew you'd sync up. I'm definitely a syncer. So I'm somebody that syncs with everyone else for whatever reason, as much as I'm an alpha in my own life. Apparently my period likes to join the club. So that would happen a lot if I would change training groups or anything like that all over the place. Because I didn't have red flags that I would obviously say, hey, I have really bad cramps or I can't train when I'm bleeding. Nothing. I just did everything all the time. That was not the case. So ultimately from January 1st, 2021 is when things started shifting for me. So, timelines, I had been retired from competition since 2017, was still active, still doing sports, still living my life, lots of cool shit was going on. But suddenly something shifted and I had a very long bleed, seemingly out of nowhere. It wasn't as if I had hey, heads up, something's wrong, I wasn't feeling good. No, everything felt pretty standard. And I had a 30-day period. It was like, that was weird. I wasn't taking any weird supplements. No new drugs were being introduced. I don't understand why this is happening. So obviously went to the doctor. Nobody could give me any, I did blood work. I did those kinds of things. And that was the first step into what ended up being a very long journey of question marks, of just constant question marks. So that was the first time for the next 3 years that I would experience these really, really long and heavy. It wasn't as if I was just spotting for 30 days. I would have pretty aggressive periods for the whole time where, I would get asked, what's your cycle? How much are you bleeding? What color is it? And I was getting all these questions that I had never discussed for whatever reason with anyone. And it was, quite frankly, pretty terrifying. I'm a grown woman. And now I basically feel I'm bleeding in a panic. My body's freaking out about something and no one can tell me what to do.
And how does that affect your day to day? What you're living your life at that point? I can't even imagine. Okay, we're going to get to talking about cyclical living and how we should be, we're moving our body differently, we're eating differently, we're resting differently. But at that time in your life, you're bleeding all of the time. Yeah. What does your day to day look when you are in this unexpected shift of who am I now?
Yeah, so let's reflect on what I explained about when I was 19. Okay, well, pivot, just make it work. Make it look normal. The small group of friends that I might have talked about what was happening, my partner knew, and he was doing everything he could to support me. Just looked like everything was fine. I wasn't taking any more time. I wasn't resting. I was still working, and it was in the public eye. And just a 13 or 14-year-old girl, I would just get my period randomly in the middle of things, and I'd know physically, you know, when you got your period, and because especially when it was as heavy as it was, I would just be, and I've been on camera in the middle of a moment and just got my period right then and there, and just have to continue powering through whatever I was discussing, and then go to the bathroom, clean out your shorts and try to put them back on and leave. You know, and I'm an adult. This is something that they would put in a movie for like a teenager who just got her period. And I'm a 30-something-year-old woman who's, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Stocks in women's hygiene products at that point. Like I was carrying around bags of them because as much as you'd be like, just be natural, it doesn't work as easily when you're having these very unexpected experiences with your own body.
You're a high functioning athlete. You're on a camera and nobody is on the other side, even thinking about that when we look at women in media, women in professional sports. I'm going to tell you, nobody thought about that as we all watched the Paris Olympics go down and those athletes are jumping in the water and doing these incredible things. No one's wondering, what are her hormones? Is she struggling to even show up today to be able to not be worrying about all of this other stuff going on in her body, right?
Yeah, never mind. Oh, is my tampon out right now?
Yeah.
Like, there's just those simple things, but the things that you like, every female athlete that has to be in a performance, whatever, you don't have to be an athlete. If you're in the public eye in any way and your body is for people to look at, there are things that you do to get ready that you're actively sure about. Okay, I have to make sure that this is all tucked in and good so that nobody notices this thing that we all, is supernatural. We could all talk. It's literally supernatural, by the way, but it's also actually natural. This was a very unnatural experience, that's for sure. I'll tell you that, for those, you know, up until November 30th. So to Des's question, how did I find you guys, right? I was doing a ton of work behind the scenes, so it wasn't as if I was ignoring it, but for all intents and purposes, people couldn't have told you that there was something wrong with me. Maybe physically we could look at pictures, you might be like, oh, you looked a bit tired. Yeah, sure. But my blood levels and everything was fine. No one could find a single thing on a panel that would point at, this is the reason. And that's, of course, what we're looking for. I did tons of internal exams. We compared against times. We would take time and come back, and I was tracking a period that the app couldn't even keep up with. I went back to it and it's deleted the past because there was just so many periods. Sorry, you can't look now. I was like, oh. So when Eversio kind of came across my plane of view, I was, oh, what is this? You know, we connected. And quite frankly, the first time we chatted, it had nothing to do with that. We chatted, I was interested. You were willing to send me some product to try, and I was like, yeah, cool. And I didn't really connect with it at the moment because I was probably so distracted by everything else. Didn't occur to me that that was going to be something that would be helpful for what I was going through, because at that point I'd spent $5,000 or more, even in that first year, of external help. So obviously the healthcare that's covered, but I was doing additional naturopathic and GP stuff. I was trying everything. So if someone wants to come at me and be, oh, did you try? The answer is yes. Went to everything. I didn't just go the natural way and hope it would stop. I was going to emergency and they're like, blink, blink, we don't know what to do with you. Here, take the pill that we give car accident patients to stop internal bleeding. That's what, it didn't do anything, obviously, because that's not what was happening. But that's the kind of solutions that I was given. And then, of course, there were also really great doctors who were doing everything they could, but no one could figure it out. So we reconnected probably a month or two after at first, just to kind of do a follow-up. And that's when I was very open and honest and just begging the world for help. I don't know what to do, but here's what I've been going through. And both of you were, hold on.
Divine timing. Meanwhile, back at the ranch at Eversio HQ, you're not the only one who was going through, I mean, nobody's story had been as profound as yours. When we heard that 30-day bleed, we were just, put yourself in her shoes. The empathy came at us hard. And what we were experimenting with, we were doing 75 hard, which, you know, we're not professional athletes. I mean, Des was close at one time, but me, definitely not. Des makes me work out. And we were really, you know, cyclical living had kind of become this trendy buzzword around. We had looked into it. We were playing with it a bit ourselves. And I don't know why we weren't even incorporating mushrooms into our cyclical living. We were doing it through movement. We were moving our bodies differently depending on For me, the moon, because I'm not bleeding anymore. I'm the old lady in the crew. And for Des, based on her menstrual cycle. So we weren't just, going heavy and lifting hard weights and running all of the time. We were doing Pilates some days and doing yoga some days and just going for a walk some days, depending on where we were in the cycle. We were eating differently. We were resting, forcing ourselves to rest. And just seeing what that felt in our body. And a month in, I looked at Des and said, why are we not changing the mushrooms that we take during those times as well? Because I'm somebody that came into the mushroom biz because I loved lion's mane mushroom. I was looking for brain health, and no one's ever going to tell me that I'm not taking lion's mane every day.
Yeah.
And, and Des had her favorite mushrooms, and we just were doing the same things because they worked for us. And we were living in what we felt was optimal health because of this mushroom protocol we had each designed for ourselves. But cyclical living is so different than that, where when we are in that week one, when we are in that menstrual phase, moving into follicular, moving through ovulatory, and then through the luteal phase, we're changing how we eat, we're changing how we move. Why aren't we changing the mushrooms we're taking?
Yeah.
So when we connected with you, we had just finished a month of trialing taking the mushrooms to match up with what was happening cyclically.
Yeah.
And when you came on the screen, I mean, Des and I feel we minded it to each other, Des. And maybe, Des, you can come in and just talk about why we knew in that conversation without anyone saying anything. This is something we were going to try to convince Cassie to take on.
Totally, Brandi. And, you weren't bleeding, and I was bleeding, and I was following my menstrual cycle, and I have very regular periods. And so for me, it was, okay, I'll try it. I don't know what sort of benefit I need. I don't get outrageous cramping. Some women do. It's pretty, I know exactly for the most part when I'm going to get it. I'm in tune in that sense. But I don't know, Brandi, I think you're right. Maybe we minded it to each other, but I just remember being so in the moment with you and connecting with you, Cassie. And I can't explain it. It's just one of those feelings where we're hearing you share your story. And it was amazing to hold space for you in that moment as a fellow woman who just wanted to be there and allow you to express how you were feeling. And when Brandi said that to you, well, we have this idea. We have no idea how this is going to work.
And I was like,
and when she said it, I was, oh yeah, this is happening. We have no expectations because we were experiencing what we were experiencing. And so I guess the only way to describe it, and maybe Brandi, you agree, is it just felt right. This is the moment where it just came out and presented itself.
Yeah, and that's mushrooms for you. And I think what we could feel was that day, Cassie, when you came to us, we could feel the cortisol through the screen. Your stress hormones had to have been, you were in distress. I will do anything was where you were at. How can it hurt? And I think the beautiful thing about mushrooms for anyone is there are no side effects. If they don't work for you, just stop taking them. Unlike the birth control pill, which can be very difficult to come off of. And we thought, what's it going to hurt? If you give this a try, our N of 2 study just became an N of 3. Right? We're looking for the research. Really, none of it exists because most mushroom research is either done by men and on men, or the companies are owned by men. So here we were, the three of us, let's go, let's see. So I had experienced really improved consistency with my energy. So I'm somebody who tends to vibrate very high. In Ayurvedic medicine, when I do the dosha quiz, I'm super vata. And I just am go, 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 go all the time. And then get to that point where I'm about to hit burnout. And I needed to learn to rest, to take that time to slow down and not do that all of the time. Des is far more balanced. She takes the dosha quiz in Ayurvedic medicine and she's perfectly balanced. Vata, Pitta, Kapha, she just comes to play.
God bless you, Des.
Yeah, and it's
thank you,
right?
someone.
But for her, and I mean, she can speak to what she felt, but what we really noticed is that we can take all of the mushrooms at different times and experience things we never had because we weren't matching them up. And when it came to you, I thought, I just felt if we can get your foundational hormones, your oxytocin, insulin, cortisol, those foundational hormones to come into balance, to get regulated, which is what mushrooms do, and different ones do different things. If we can get that foundation settled, maybe these sex hormones, maybe this estrogen, testosterone, progesterone business that's creating the lifelong everyday period for you to balance, we will learn something about cyclical living and about these immunomodulating and in general modulating properties of mushrooms. So away we went. shipped Cassie 9 products and literally said, and I mean, I think Cassie, because we said to you, okay, so in your menstrual phase on day 1, and you're going to go, I don't know when my menstrual phase is. I don't.
I was, what? How am I supposed to do all these things? If you just know, and I'll be really transparent. Until this experiment that is ultimately now my lifestyle, I wasn't somebody that was like, oh, I totally understand all the phases. You'd be like, you're in your luteal phase? I'd have to look it up and be like, I don't know, right? when is that? It just wasn't something, I heard it, I understood it, but I didn't live it, because there wasn't any time for that. And even more transparency, when I did start this and was, okay, I'm going to do it, to what you're going to say, I was doing it with you, Brandi. I was, let's just do it with the moon.
When we look back at that date, it was new moon. Like, we knew if we ship this out, it's going to arrive to you. And we're like, thank you, universe. You've lined it up. You're with me. We're lunar cycle. It's new moon. You're starting week 1. Like, wake up and start that cycle.
And that was perfect for me, because it felt a place to start. And that's what I couldn't find, because, you know, for if you haven't read the story that we have on the PDF, but I will say, because I think it's just so impactful. When I did the math, I was like, So January 1st, 2021 is when things really started, and I was bleeding a lot, and not just those 30 days. One time I had like 60-day bleed, and that one wasn't as heavy the whole time. But again, 2 months of bleeding, people understand that I was panicking. And yes, my cortisol levels but I couldn't let anyone know. I'm like, I can't stop living my life. It wasn't until November 30th of 2023. And so that's over, 1,000 days. 1,000 days. And in those over more than 1,000 days, I was bleeding for 540 of those days. So yeah, I was, and you know what, honestly, Des, you said it best, to hold space for me. I had felt so unsafe entirely. In every situation, I mean, there were some real safe spots that I could go, and my naturopath and I had an acupuncturist, and people that were trying their best to hold space for me, but no one could help really change anything. They were just listening and asking questions, and I'm sure the paperwork across all of those files would be quite a scene to really see the whole picture. But I felt so unsafe, and in the conversation we had, I felt very safe and seen, and that was something that I was like, there's no reason not to try this, because to the point I knew it was going to be an actual safe choice. It wasn't going to hurt me. I was already, technically bleeding to death, but somehow not dying. What now?
You're still living your life. You were still going out and giving 110% and being that person who was through that. If you watch your Instagram account, you're still inspiring other people to go and live their dreams.
I hope so.
As you're quietly truly suffering. So off goes this package. Tell us about it. So this package arrives to you. You got 9 jars of mushrooms. Some are blends, some are capsules. I think we sent you a journal. We're write that stuff down. We want to know everything.
Let's organize. What did you do? So I quickly got a nice little plastic bin that fit in one of our cupboards, because I got to make this a part of my routine immediately. I can't get in my own way. So set them up the way that we had been testing, and you're like, okay, here's what you do. So we're in the new moon, so start here. Take this in the morning, take this in the afternoon, take this at night. And that's as simple as it was for me. Because I had been focused so much on what was going to be wrong that even when you just journal about it, I was like, look, I just need to do something consistent first. And if anything changes, then maybe we'll have a conversation.
Sure.
I was like, bless you both, but no, I have enough stuff that I'm trying to just keep doing. So let me just put this into my coffee, have these pills at lunchtime, and then maybe it's a pill, or depending on what it is, something else at nighttime. I can do that. That's not hard. So did it for a month straight, 2 weeks of the first row, 1 week of the second row, 1 week of the third row. And then suddenly I actually hadn't been bleeding during that time for whatever reason. I was okay, cool, that's nice. And then I got a period as things would have been resetting to go back into the first row. And I was like, that's curious. Okay. This is probably going to be another long bleed, right?
Is it a coincidence? Maybe it just happened,
I'm expecting to bear down for another 3 weeks of bleeding, or 2 weeks, something crazy. And it was 5 days. 5 days of the most normal period I'd had in 3 years. That's interesting. Okay, I'm not going to say anything yet. Fluking. Maybe I rested more. Maybe I did, So to the point, we discussed this in a way that, done perfectly, you'd be eating a certain way, you'd be moving a certain way. I would still, to this day, really, really intentionally would like to do some more of that, but I'm still much working in the veil. He said, how many more things can I put on my plate? So my life wasn't necessarily in line with the movement or the food, but at least I was doing something. And I just want to put that out there because it's, if you look at this protocol and, oh, I don't have time to change a million more things. I get it. I was desperate, but still not desperate enough to change my life drastically. Right. Yeah. Because it feels so uncomfortable, but I've been doing so good. I'm keeping myself protected in this bubble of confusion. My identity's tied to all these things. If I stop doing all those things, who am I already going to be? And I'm bleeding in the background. Nobody can help me. Like, this is hopeless, and I can only feel safe and controlled in the zone of my life, which, unpack that. I'm doing my work. Thank you very much. But there's a lot there. And I have, since this all happened, I will say this was clearly my body
screaming at you.
For whatever reason, you're not paying attention. And it wasn't just, you need mushrooms. Yeah, you need some regulation here, but there's so much more to this story that came out because of it. And I'm grateful for it, despite how I really could have done without all the bleeding, but obviously not. If that's the only way I was going to listen, then my body's fine. So much more obvious, worse things. I could have got really, really sick. These are how cancers develop. Like, I don't know what would have happened and what could still happen, but this was definitely a wake-up call. So after that first month of a consistent period, I was, oh, nice. And then it happened again, and I was, okay. So now I'm scared to stop it, right? And what if I stop taking them? Do I just get a period again? So we did connect after those 2 months, and I did say, I was, okay, hey, I'm still a little skeptical, but I got good news. And so that's how it started. So it was ultimately 3 months, and then now, we started however many months it's been. There have been, full transparency again, there have been a little bit of discrepancies between, sometimes I'll have 3 days of spotting, it'll stop, and then I'll have a couple days of bleeding, and I'll be like, I don't really know where the start and end of that was, but okay. But I do have 4 to 5 weeks of no bleeding since then, all the time. And that is freedom to me again. I was like back to living as a 28-day, 30-day, 40-day, I don't care, a cyclical woman having a hormonal experience in that time frame. Not these, I was in whatever version of bleeding hormones for 3 years. And I'm like, I can't live like this. Like, please stop. So,
Cassie, tell us about, so as you're starting to incorporate these mushrooms, and we sent you some capsules and we sent you some blends. And said, you gotta get this. What did you do? Okay, tell us about capsules versus blends and like the incorporating of that into a routine, because people come at us with this question all the time. We either have people that say, I'm never swallowing a capsule, that's just not what I do. Or we have people that say, I hate mushrooms and I don't want to taste them, and I'm not going to put them in my food because it'll be nasty and gross. Did anything show up for you where you found it was a struggle, and how were you incorporating it into your food or your drinks?
Yeah, I very straightforward was just like taking the pills or putting the blend into my coffees or beverages. I didn't notice it, especially morning stuff. If it was a morning blend, it would go into my coffee. Okay. And I wasn't giving up coffee at the time. I'll come in and out of it, but it's just something I really enjoy. So that was where it was going.
You didn't have to change a routine that you already had.
No, and if pills were really something you can't swallow, I don't have an issue with that, but I do understand. There really is only one blend that you might taste and stuff, but just put it in something that has a bit of stronger taste and it'll disappear. Nothing tastes like mushrooms. I don't know, people that hate mushrooms have this big aversion to that taste. It's not that. That's definitely not what you're going to taste. There's more of an earthy blend. It's the reishi, right, that does that? Yeah. And that's, okay, I get it. But I can promise you that if it's going to help you, you're not going to care much if that's the only tiny bit of earthy taste you have in anything. Otherwise, I did put it in smoothies, occasionally baked with it, but that was more when I was integrating it into my lifestyle more regularly. When I was just protocol for months at a time, it was just in the morning, I would take a pill or blend something into a coffee. Fine, I would just go to the cupboard that I put everything in, do that. And then when I had lunch, I would either have it with me wherever I was, so I put the pills in or have it in a little container and, again, put it in. Sometimes I do it in like a ginger and orange shot or something that's going to really overpower it, and then that way it doesn't matter. And then at dinner time, same thing. Whether I would take it with meals, usually try to, or right after. It became very easy to remember. And to my point before about being afraid to stop, because I was like, oh shit, what if this is the thing that's causing it to work out for me? There were some times where For example, the stock was low and then I'd run out
Yes.
of pills and I was, oh God, there's a row I can't take right now. What's happening? And everything was still fine. So my body had reached a level of like stasis hormonally that was sustainable. And I just am more mindful about paying attention to kind of the whole experience of being a woman right now. I did want to have feedback both for you and for me to understand, like, where am I in my cycle, especially when things go a bit longer between bleeds now. So still don't have quite I know when I'm going to get it. It's going to show up now, but at least I can pay attention to how I'm feeling. And then I'll start bleeding and go, yeah, that was me being more emotional right before, but I was just so busy and wrapped up in my life and who I was being for my family and all those things that it's okay to point at it, not as a blame and say, oh, well, you can't be emotional this week, but to say, hey, recognize that might be how you show up the week before your bleed. And maybe that could give you some signs in the future that maybe you do need to slow down, or maybe just give yourself some grace. There's times where I'm super emotional, and then the next week, and again, I'm 40 now, okay? Everyone listening, I'm 40 years old, and I'm only just now going, oh, it's my body telling me, hey, guess what? We're going into full dump right now. Like your whole body is just gonna.
Hello, perimenopause.
Exactly.
This is it.
And I'm a little bit sad that it took me this long to realize, but the information wasn't out there. My mom and I didn't have these conversations. She didn't have access to this type of information. So it's no one's fault. But we're finally in a place where we can discuss this at a level that is 100% female based, and let's talk about it with the women who are having periods, not the male doctors who have done the research, as you said, Desiree, before. Fine, you did it. Thanks for all your work. Now can we actually start back at zero?
And for people
and do the actual.
You're a unique. So I mean, this makes me just think about you've talked about people so many times in there, and how you have this responsibility to the humans in your life. And again, we follow you on social media, and you talk so much about how. I mean, you're a public speaker talking about mental well-being and physical well-being and overcoming challenges. And I know you've really touched so many hearts in that community service that you do. And I know you've spoken with athletes. You were in Tokyo at the 2020 games, and just you made one comment, and I'm going to quote you. You said something about witnessing the raw human element of sport that truly connects us all. And at Eversio, we're huge fans of connection. We know everything's connected. It's one of the first things that really drew us to mushrooms. They're symbols of interconnectedness. So I want to ask you about that, about this connection, and in your life, can you tell us about that human connection piece and the people who were influential to you in your life and who were an important part of this healing journey and who were alongside watching this happen and along through the shift, and how that connection to whoever's around for you or whoever is influential for you played into things?
Yeah. Oh, it's so big. I had such an impactful, connected journey with the females in the healthcare world right when this happened. And that wasn't an experience that I had as an athlete. I had a couple really incredible females in my corner, but for the most part, it was a lot of male-dominant practitioners. So when I needed the most was when the universe was, here they are. So I was living in Canmore when this all started, and the naturopath there's an acupuncturist there. If anyone wants to reach out, I'll give names, happy to do that. But for the purpose of this, just know that all these healthcare professionals were the ones that I ended up meeting. It wasn't necessarily something that I only want women. They're only going to know. I expected to have a bunch of men still telling me what was or wasn't wrong. So these female energies that were willing to hold that space and listen and not say, you're crazy. The amount of times I still occasionally did hear in some of other more medical rooms where this just happens. And I'm, no, it doesn't. And I would say that. No, it doesn't. I haven't been bleeding, especially when I reached the 2-year mark and was beyond 2 years. I would stop telling me that this just happens. It's been happening for over 2 years now. I'm not okay. So stop just gaslighting me into believing that I'm just going to bleed for the rest of my life until I hit menopause and then it stops. That's crazy. Stop it. So I am so and continue to be so grateful for those women who were taking, let's get blood tests, let's do this, let's get IVs. They were just doing everything they could to support my balance of imbalance. So, as I said, I was still in such a state of stress So I was doing IVs and things like that to just try and mitigate the stress that was living in my physical body, whether or not I was able to slow down and do that work. And I will say, there was a comment at first that maybe I was just going too hard as an athlete because I had started running again and picked up kickboxing again. And so I stopped everything. I was, all right, I will stop being active if that's what's causing this, to see if that's the case.
But that's asking you to stop being you, and that's never the answer to me.
Right. Well, I was miserable, and of course then started putting on weight again. All the things that happen when you're not able to move your body. So you're just like, okay. So no, that wasn't the answer. But I did try all the things and all the recommendations. But yeah, so the females, and then I also connected with the Indigenous community at one point, because to the other side of this, I was wondering, is this something I'm not managing at a cellular level of trauma? Like, something I went through, something I'm feeling upset about still, is it living in my body? So I went there and had ceremonies, and I was just like, please. And these were all women. It was all these women in my life. And even up until recently, as recently as last month, I've been just in circles with these incredible females who are willing to just stand there with me and see me and say,
you're not alone.
Like, we understand, whether or not I'm discussing this situation or other things in my life that I'm willing to unpack now. I'm just so grateful. And present company included, the two of you just absolutely saw me and were like, okay, hey, here's some help.
I love that.
I think that's something that is really missing. You talked about, even now with your cycle, each woman and each person is unique.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times as women, we really try and fit into a cookie cutter model, right? Of, it must be 28 days. It must be a 28-day cycle.
Yeah.
Well, why is that? Is it the influence of the pharmaceutical industry and birth control pill, because that's 28 pills in there, right? For your birth, or maybe 21 if you're taking the sugar pills or not.
Yeah.
But so often we are just trying to squish ourselves into these shapes where it doesn't feel it's authentic, and it's an authentic self-expression.
Yeah.
And I think your story is so beneficial for so many people, whether it's male or female. You needed support, and doctors would say to you, this just happens. Well, does it actually just happen? Or maybe it is happening to so many other women. But has anybody else wondered why? Okay, there are people here where this is happening, and it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay that you're going to a medical professional and you're saying, I'm not okay and I need support. I know my body.
Yeah.
And as a doctor, as any sort of health practitioner, as a friend, nobody knows your body better than you do. So I think it's just really remarkable, going back again to your resilience of, I have to advocate for myself. And at a point where the stars aligned and things just serendipitously happened, you found an avenue where you could come back to yourself. And Brandi and I talk about that all the time with functional mushrooms. And that was something that I experienced while doing this cyclical living protocol. And what you said really resonated with me, where you said first you're following the protocol and then you're changing it up and kind of doing what intuitively feels right. That's what health really is. It doesn't have to be this complicated thing, right? A protocol is great when I have no idea where to start. I'm very overwhelmed. Somebody just help me, give me a structure and a guideline.
Yeah.
So I think it's really amazing that you were able to add that in.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. If you could go back and say something to yourself around that time that this all happened, or give yourself some sort of advice to that former version of you, what would you say?
It's the same advice I'm getting now as I go deeper into this journey for myself, and it's just keep listening. Just keep listening. There's a lot to what you said. We distrust ourselves for whatever reason, whether we've been built to do so by design of media or otherwise, or pharmaceuticals, especially in the health sense, or we're just not listening to ourselves anymore, and we're not listening to each other. And that, for me, has been just such a big piece of this. Really, really listen. You intuitively know what you need, and unfortunately we've stopped paying attention to that because there's just so much noise, and it's okay. This isn't about guilting ourselves and saying that we did it wrong, but now you have an opportunity, and that's what this was. This is an opportunity for you to listen harder, and that wouldn't, of course, been of what I wanted to hear then, because I was like, stop it, I'm trying to pay attention. But that's what I needed. It was going to be okay. Even though every time my period would slow, I'd go, oh, okay, this is the end. This is the end of whatever this is. It wasn't. It wasn't done yet. I still wasn't listening. So yeah, just keep listening. It's okay for it to be real quiet, but just listen to yourselves, listen to others, and ask for help. Yeah. Maybe ask for help sooner.
I love it.
But that's a hard thing to do for lots of people.
I am so happy just sitting here watching you talk right now. You're a different human being, and it's just such a beautiful thing to see. And I mean, you are glowing, and you just, I can feel the calm and the peace that has come from you. And if we were any part of that, I just love that mushrooms got to be in there. Yeah. Okay, I have one last question for you. I know you have to run off. You have still live in the busy life, but I can tell you're living it in such a more grounded way.
I'm going to yoga. See? So that I'm not being busy.
You're a changed woman. I love it.
Okay, so my last question for you. So at Eversio Wellness, we have this tagline. We stick it on everything, a mushroom for every moment. And I mean, we all have our own kind of different connection to that phrase and what it means, but I want to know, what does a mushroom for every moment now mean to you?
For me, it's all about the growth in yourself. To the small amount of conversation that we've really had, it's just like a blip on this story that I've lived up to now. I've done so much and been so interested in change and growth, but now it's about growth inside. I've shown up and been, if you go through my Instagram, I look at 1,000 different people, and that was a part of my journey. And I'm a soul who, for whatever reason, just needs to keep checking everything out and doing it both the hard way and what looks the crazy way to people. But yeah, for every moment of your life, I mean, this moment was a big moment. It was 3 years long, but ultimately shifted my own perspective, my husband's perspective. We're both, oh, wow, okay, let's take a big look at it. And for me, that's what this is, and that's what Eversio means.
I love it. The moments. My favorite moment of you on social media is the hoodie, blood, sweat, maple syrup.
Solid.
And I do, social media can be a negative space for some people, but I think your space over there is such a collection of those moments in time and seeing your growth. And it's a beautiful thing to watch over there.
I appreciate that.
I will end with a quote from you as well. You said, others, to our audience, for your audience, this is from you. In what ways are you taking steps toward your dreams? Big, small, artistic, athletic, or being of service. Your dreams are all incredibly powerful, and the world needs more you. Don't quit your daydream. Let this be a sign. Take action. Yeah. That's Cassie to me. And I think you became your own teacher. That's your advice. And you took that advice, and we're just so happy for you. So before we say goodbye, we need people to know, where can they connect with you? What's the best way for people to get in touch? I think there are so many athletes out there, young athletes.
Agreed.
Now we've got the senior games. So athletes that might be, I'm not kidding, you might see me in surfing one day in the Senior Olympics.
I'll be there.
But where can people connect with you if they just want to be in touch and hear more of your story and ask you what's on their mind after hearing your story?
Yeah, very easy. I made it very simple for everyone, despite the spelling my last name. So it's just Cassie Hawrysh everywhere. So if you just Google it, it'll pull up all the avenues. Redoing my website right now, so forgive me if someone clicks on that and it's not working out. But ultimately, Instagram's probably the best place to land if you want to DM me. So CassieHawrysh.
And we will link that up right here in the show notes. Thanks so much for joining us, Cassie, and all of our fungi friends. And with that, we will see you next time. Be well, everyone.